I took my coffee out onto the porch like I always did, ready to enjoy the morning sun, the fresh air, and the sight of my perfect, thriving tomatoes. Only, the tomatoes weren't there. I froze, blinking at the empty space where the ripe, sun-kissed fruits had been just yesterday. At first, I thought it was a raccoon, or maybe some over-enthusiastic squirrel with an expensive taste in produce. But deep down, I knew better. Karen. Karen Whitmore, HOA president and self-appointed ruler of our neighborhood. The woman who had made my garden her personal obsession, always commenting on the shape of my tomato cages, the color of my mulch, even the way I watered. I took a deep breath, letting the realization settle. Someone had trespassed. Someone had stolen from me, and I was going to catch them in the act. It all started with a simple, yet devastating morning. The kind of morning you expect to enjoy, coffee in hand, stepping out into the fresh air of your garden. Instead, I stepped onto my porch, only to find an empty spot where my tomatoes had been just yesterday. I stood frozen, staring at the bare ground where my beautiful tomatoes had once ripened under the sun. It was like losing a part of me. You might think I'm exaggerating, but gardening had become my escape. After all the stress, the neighborhood drama, and the HOA's ridiculous rules, my tomatoes were the only thing I could rely on. They were my peace, my pride, and at the moment, my only source of happiness. I checked around. No sign of a raccoon or some other wild animal. This wasn't a fluke. Someone had been messing with my garden. I was fuming. I had spent weeks tending to these plants, talking to them like they were my friends, and now they were gone. The feeling of betrayal hit hard. I walked to the garden gate, seething with anger. Who would do this? My thoughts raced, but the answer was obvious. Karen. Karen Whitmore was the new president of the HOA, and if there was one thing she loved more than enforcing ridiculous rules, it was making everyone else's life as miserable as hers. She had a vendetta against my tomatoes for months now, not because they were ugly. No, Karen had some ridiculous idea that my tomatoes were a threat to the visual harmony of the neighborhood. But this was too much. I couldn't just let it go. No, I needed to find out who had done this and make sure they knew it was my property, not some community project they could steal from. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache. My nerves were on edge, my thoughts still racing from the night before. I had just discovered something that seemed like a petty, childish act. My tomatoes were gone. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was bigger than that. Someone had crossed a line. And that someone was Karen. I took a deep breath, grabbed my coffee, and stepped out onto the porch, hoping the morning sun would calm my nerves. But as I gazed out at the empty patch where my tomatoes had been, that burning frustration started creeping back into my chest. My pride, my effort, my joy, all of it had been taken from me in one careless act. Who would do this? Who would destroy something so simple and meaningful? Karen. I had a feeling deep down, a gut instinct that it was her. Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, the woman who believed every blade of grass had to be perfect and every inch of every yard had to adhere to some unwritten, absurd rule book. But I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I needed evidence. I wasn't going to let this turn into a petty neighborhood rumor. No. I was going to catch her in the act. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Karen was too smart to be caught red-handed, but I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I needed a plan. The first step was to set up a security system. I wasn't a tech person, but I wasn't going to let that stop me. I ordered a wireless camera system and spent the afternoon setting it up in my backyard, positioning it so it covered my tomato patch. I even added a motion sensor, just in case Karen had any idea how to sneak in without getting caught. As I fiddled with the system, I could already imagine the look on her face when I had her on camera, stealing what was rightfully mine. I couldn't believe my eyes. She was wearing an oversized hat and gardening gloves, her tiny dog Princess trotting behind her, completely oblivious to the crime she was about to commit. Karen had to be the most audacious person alive. She was about to steal my tomatoes again. I grabbed my phone and started recording. I was shaking, but I knew this was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The camera recorded as Karen bent down, plucked the juiciest, most perfect tomato from my plants, and tucked it into her bag. No hesitation, no guilt, just straight-up theft. I was speechless. I watched the footage again and again, almost laughing at the sheer ridiculousness of it. It felt like I had caught her in the act of something much bigger, much more sinister than just stealing a tomato. I could feel the anger boiling in my chest, but it was mixed with something else, power, satisfaction. I had proof, and I was going to use it to bring this woman down. The next morning, I walked outside with my coffee, feeling a little more awake than the day before. I was already plotting my next move. What could I do to make sure Karen would never dare steal from me again? I had the evidence, but now I needed to make her regret this, make her feel the consequences of messing with me. That's when it hit me. Why not give her a taste of her own medicine? I was done being passive. I was done letting her stomp all over me. I took my phone out and ordered Carolina Reaper seeds, the hottest peppers on the planet. I had an idea. The plan was simple. I would secretly plant the hottest peppers in the world among my tomatoes. Karen wouldn't know what hit her. I imagined her coming to steal another batch of tomatoes, only to bite into one of my hidden Carolina Reapers. The thought made me laugh out loud. She would never know what hit her. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about sending a message that if you mess with me, you're going to regret it. I wasn't just protecting my tomatoes. I was protecting my sanity, my space, and my right to live without being harassed by a power-hungry HOA president. The next few days were spent preparing my secret weapon. I dug holes, carefully planted the Carolina Reaper seedlings, and kept an eye on Karen. As the peppers grew, I couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. I was in control now, and it felt amazing. I made sure everything was perfect. The peppers were growing rapidly, their vibrant red color slowly appearing, their heat intensifying every day. Soon, they would be ready for harvest. And when Karen came back for her next tomato theft, she wouldn't be expecting the fiery hell I had waiting for her. The day came sooner than I expected. I was watching the security footage when I saw her. Karen was back. I grabbed my phone and checked the live feed. She was creeping toward my garden again, her little dog trotting behind her. I could feel my pulse quicken. This was it. She reached the tomatoes. Her eyes scanned the plants, looking for the perfect fruit. Then, with a smirk, she reached into the garden and grabbed the first tomato she saw, confidently taking a big bite. And that's when the magic happened. Her eyes widened. She spat the tomato out and staggered backward, her face contorting in shock and pain. She grabbed her mouth, flailing for the hose, but she couldn't find it. She stumbled around the garden, clearly in agony, her hands trembling as she tried to wash away the burning sensation that was clearly overwhelming her. I couldn't help but laugh. The sweet, fiery justice was finally here. Karen shrieked. The sound was so high-pitched it was almost comical. She couldn't handle the heat. The pepper had done its job. She flailed around the garden, desperately trying to cool her mouth with the water hose. Her hair was a mess, her face flushed with the burn, and it was only getting worse. She tried to scream at me, but nothing coherent came out. I couldn't help it. I laughed harder than I had in weeks. The woman who had stolen from me, who had tried to ruin my peace, was now getting exactly what she deserved. "Maybe you should stick to store-bought tomatoes, Karen," I said, watching her melt down with a sense of satisfaction I had never known. Karen finally managed to regain some semblance of control, but the damage was done. She hobbled off my property, muttering about poisoning and revenge. I didn't care. This was the payoff I'd been waiting for. I went inside, sat down with my coffee, and took a deep breath. That was the moment I knew. I had won. My phone buzzed on the morning of the HOA meeting, and I could already feel a pit of dread forming in my stomach. It was an email from the HOA office with the subject line, "Urgent action required." I knew it had to be Karen. Who else would send an email like that? I opened it. The words on the screen made my stomach drop. "We are requesting your presence at an emergency HOA meeting. This will be in regards to your recent gardening activities, specifically the unsanctioned plants you are growing on your property, which have already caused concern within the community." "I knew this wouldn't end with a pepper burn," I muttered under my breath. I couldn't help but feel a bit of amusement mixed with frustration. Karen was relentless. After her embarrassing public meltdown, I thought she'd at least back off. But she hadn't. Now she was using the full power of the HOA to target me again. Her attempt to keep her control over the neighborhood had reached a whole new level, and I wasn't about to let her get away with it. As I walked into the room, I saw Karen at the front, sitting with a smug smile plastered across her face. She wore her usual pastel cardigan and oversized sunglasses, clearly trying to exude an air of authority. But I could see the fear lurking behind those shades. The humiliation from the pepper incident had clearly shaken her, even if she refused to admit it. Then finally, Karen stood up. The room went silent and all eyes turned to her. She cleared her throat dramatically, like she was about to deliver some important, life-altering speech. "It has come to my attention," she began, her voice dripping with feigned concern, "that certain individuals in this community have been making irresponsible decisions regarding their gardening activities. Specifically, one individual has taken it upon themselves to grow dangerous, unregulated plants that threaten the safety of our neighborhood." I felt my blood boil. She was talking about me, of course, and I could already see the seeds of doubt she was planting in the room. "Here we go," I whispered under my breath. "The situation has become quite serious," Karen continued, pacing slowly in front of the room, her hands clasped in front of her. "There have been reports of extreme discomfort caused by these plants. In particular, the hybrid peppers that have been shown to cause severe physical reactions. One unfortunate resident experienced intense pain after mistakenly consuming one, and we all know how dangerous that could have been." I wanted to scream, but I held my tongue. Karen was trying to make this sound like a public health crisis, but we both knew what was really going on. She was angry, desperate to salvage whatever shred of power she had left, and this was her last attempt to punish me. But I wasn't about to let her spin this out of control. I stood up abruptly, cutting her off mid-sentence. "Karen, with all due respect, you're not here to talk about the well-being of this community. You're here because you're still upset about losing control of your little HOA kingdom. You're mad because your precious authority is slipping away, and now you want to make me the villain." The room went dead silent. I could feel the eyes of everyone on me as I spoke, and for once I wasn't afraid. I had nothing to hide. The truth was on my side, and I wasn't going to let Karen twist it any longer. Karen's face flushed crimson with rage. "That's a ridiculous accusation," she snapped. "You've been creating chaos with your garden. You're a danger to the neighborhood." I took a deep breath and locked eyes with her. "I'm not the one stealing from people's gardens, Karen. That's you. That's what this is all about, isn't it? You think you can control everything, even the things that don't belong to you." The tension in the room was so thick I could almost taste it. Karen's lips trembled as she tried to regain control, but she knew she was losing this battle. She could feel it. She could see it in the faces of the neighbors around her, some of them looking at her with disdain, others sneaking approving glances at me. And then, out of nowhere, a familiar voice spoke up from the back of the room. "Karen, you're a fraud!" I turned to see Margaret, the usually quiet secretary of the HOA, standing with her arms crossed, glaring at Karen. "I've seen you do this before," Margaret continued, her voice steady but fierce. "You've been stealing from this garden for months. You're the one who's been causing all the problems, not her." Karen's face went white, and the room erupted in chaos. People began muttering, some even applauding Margaret's brave stand. I could see Karen's mask cracking, her confidence evaporating. "How dare you accuse me of—" Karen started, but Margaret wasn't done. "I've seen you taking tomatoes. I've seen you stealing. And I've got proof." Margaret held up her phone, showing a video of Karen sneaking through my garden, taking tomatoes, and then running off with them. The room gasped. "This is absurd!" Karen spat, stumbling backward. "You have no right." But it was too late. The damage had been done. The neighbors were turning against her. Some were even shaking their heads in disbelief. The very woman who had tried to control them was now exposed for what she truly was, a petty thief and a liar. I stepped forward, my voice calm but firm. "This is over, Karen. You're done. The HOA board is turning on you, and this community is waking up. You can't control us anymore." As I walked back to my house, I couldn't help but smile. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. The next day, I planted more tomatoes. This time, I wasn't worried, because if Karen tried to take them again, I had more than just peppers waiting for her. It wasn't just about tomatoes anymore. No, Karen's relentless attacks on my garden had grown personal, and I was done playing nice. The neighborhood was shifting, and so was I. This wasn't going to be another quiet battle. I was about to take a stand that would turn the tide once and for all. The sun had barely risen when I stepped outside, only to see her, Karen, with her typical smug expression, strolling along the sidewalk like she owned the entire neighborhood. And just like that, I knew something was coming. She had her eyes set on my garden again, and I wasn't about to let her win this time. As I walked to the garden gate, my eyes narrowed. There she was, standing at the end of my driveway with a clipboard in hand, as if she had some divine right to regulate my life. "Karen," I said, my voice sharp. "What now?" She turned slowly, that familiar smug smile spreading across her face. "I'm afraid there's been another incident," she said, waving the clipboard in my direction. "I'm filing another complaint about your irregular gardening practices. These peppers—" She paused, taking a long look at my thriving plants. "They're a hazard to the community. You need to remove them immediately." "Remove them?" I echoed, incredulous. "Are you serious? The only thing hazardous here is your obsession with controlling my life." I clenched my fists, the rage bubbling up. "You're not the boss of me. You never were, Karen. I've had enough of your bullying." Karen's eyes flashed with that unyielding look of superiority. "You'll regret this." With that, she turned on her heel and marched away, but not before casting one last spiteful glance at me. I stood there, my chest heaving, a surge of anger coursing through my veins. Enough was enough. She had crossed the line, and it was time to make her pay, on my terms. The next morning, I gathered everything I needed: my legal documents, photos of my garden, and a detailed account of Karen's repeated violations of my privacy. I wasn't just going to take this lying down. This time I was fighting back, and not just with words. I called my lawyer and explained the situation. He promised to help me prepare a counterclaim that would shut Karen down once and for all. But I wasn't stopping there. I also had a little surprise in store for her, one that would leave her completely speechless. Later that afternoon, as I stood in my backyard, I noticed Karen, once again, lurking near my property line. This time, she wasn't just observing. She was writing something down in her ever-present clipboard, no doubt planning her next attack. I walked towards her, taking slow, deliberate steps. She didn't see me until I was just a few feet away. "Karen," I called, my voice calm but brimming with fury. "What exactly are you doing this time?" She froze, the smugness fading from her face as she looked up at me. "I'm noting down the continuing issues with your garden," she said in that insufferable tone. "This is the last time I'll warn you." I stood there, holding back a laugh. "You're ridiculous. You've already lost, Karen. The HOA isn't going to back you up this time. So why don't you take your complaints elsewhere?" Her expression hardened, her lips curling into a sneer. "This isn't over. You'll see." I took a step forward, my eyes locked on hers. "If you want to fight, Karen, you've got one. But be careful what you wish for." Before she could respond, I turned and walked back toward the house, every muscle in my body tense with the need to get things moving. It was time to put my plan into action, and this time, Karen wasn't going to walk away unscathed. That night, I went over the footage from my security cameras once more. There she was again, stealthily stealing tomatoes from my garden. The moment was perfect. Karen had been caught red-handed, and now I had everything I needed to expose her. But I wasn't finished. I'd already started preparing my own secret weapon. The Carolina Reapers, those fiery little monsters, were nearly ready for harvest. My plan was simple. Once Karen stole from me again, she would experience a heat like no other. Her next victory would become her biggest failure. I smiled to myself as I sat in my living room, watching the footage of Karen's latest theft. "This is just the beginning," I whispered to myself. And the next morning, as if on cue, I saw her, Karen, sneaking up to my garden again, looking around as if she was doing something innocent. She was, in fact, walking straight into my trap. "Not this time, Karen," I muttered, reaching for my phone. The stage was set. I spent the next few hours gathering all the documentation I needed, property deeds, zoning laws, and photographs of my garden. I wasn't just going to fight back with words this time. No. I was going to hit her with the full force of legal proof. Then, as the inspector arrived at my gate, I stood my ground, armed with all the evidence I needed. As he walked towards me, I handed him the papers, my voice calm but firm. "This is all I need to prove that Karen's claims are nonsense. You'll see that there's nothing wrong with my property. No hazards, no violations." He glanced through the documents quickly. "I see," he said, looking up at my garden. "I'll make sure everything's noted, but this seems clear enough." "Exactly," I replied, a small smile playing at the corners of my mouth. As he finished his inspection and left, I saw Karen standing on the other side of the street, watching us. I smiled, knowing she had lost. The battle wasn't over yet, but this time, it was my turn to win. As she reached for the tomatoes, she couldn't see the Carolina Reapers, hidden in plain sight, a deadly trap. I held my breath as she plucked a pepper, her fingers grazing the fiery red flesh. Without hesitation, she bit into it, smug satisfaction on her face. The second she chewed, her expression twisted into something unrecognizable. Her eyes widened in shock, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. What is this?" Karen sputtered, her face turning crimson. She fumbled for water, but her hands shook, unable to control the fire ravaging her mouth. I burst into laughter, watching her stumble, desperate for relief. "Guess that's a little hotter than you expected, huh?" Karen, the once untouchable HOA queen, was reduced to a sputtering mess in front of the whole neighborhood. Victory had never tasted so sweet.